A Nolan Wells bombshell report tonight. Does it reveal new witnesses? What happened the afternoon and evening? Nolan Wells seemingly disappears. His body found washed up at Horn Island.
There is one name in this case that investigators sat on for 2 weeks. Katie, while her account stayed buried in case files, another version of events, the one told by Nolan's friends, became the accepted timeline. It was repeated in news reports. It was repeated online. It became for 2 weeks what happened. But Katie's story doesn't match theirs. 2 people were with Nolan Wells in his final known minutes on Horn Island. 2 people gave statements to investigators. And those 2 statements cannot both be true. Someone is remembering something wrong. Or someone is lying. For the family of Nolan Wells, this isn't an abstract puzzle. It's the difference between grief they can make peace with and grief that never resolves. Because right now, 6 months after their son vanished on a family holiday, Christine Wansley and her husband don't just need to know what happened to Nolan. They need to know who to believe. Before we continue, this video discusses a missing person case involving presumed loss of life. We've worked to present only verified facts and to treat this family story with the seriousness it deserves. If you're new here, welcome. Consider subscribing and let me know in the comments where you're watching from tonight. Because tonight, we're going to walk through every contradiction, every data point, and every unanswered question in the disappearance of Nolan Wells. Christine Wansley remembers exactly where she was when her phone rang. It was supposed to be a good night, July 4th. Fireworks over the Mississippi Sound. Her son Nolan, 25 years old, had gone out on a boat with friends at Horn Island, a barrier island roughly 10 miles off the coast, part of the Gulf Island's national seashore. No roads, no cell towers, just sand, pine trees, and water on every side. By the time the sun went down, Nolan wasn't on that boat anymore. What followed was, by Christine's own account, the worst night of her life, made immeasurably worse by a rumor that spread through family group chats before anyone had real answers. The rumor, Katie was missing too. For a few unbearable hours, it seemed possible that 2 young people had vanished from the same remote island on the same night. It wasn't true. Katie's mother, Gracie McCormick, would later confirm that her daughter had left Horn Island safely, on a different boat, with different people, hours before the search for Nolan even began. Katie was never missing, but Katie was there, and what Katie told investigators afterward is where this case gets complicated. According to Katie, Nolan had every intention of getting back on his friend's boat before it left the island. According to Nolan's friends, Nolan chose to stay behind on Horn Island, alone on a barrier island with no ferry service, no cell signal, and no way home except by boat. Read those 2 statements again. One says he wanted to leave. One says he wanted to stay. There is no version of July 4th where both are correct. This is a fracture at the center of the Nolan Wells case, and it's the reason his family, 6 months later, still doesn't have a story they can fully trust. When investigators can't resolve the big contradiction, they often start pulling at the small ones. In this case, 3 small details refuse to line up. Thread 1, the shorts. The official police report, filed based on friend statements, describes Nolan as wearing black shorts that day, but a witness photo taken on the island, time-stamped hours before Nolan disappeared, shows him in blue shorts. It's a small detail. It might mean nothing. Memory is fallible, especially in chaotic, alcohol-involved holiday settings. But in a case built on trusting the accounts of people who were there, even a detail this small chips away at confidence. Thread 2, the keys. Nolan's car remained parked near the boat lawn for days after he vanished. His keys, it turned out, were not with the vehicle. They were sitting inside a friend's house, on top of an Xbox. Investigators eventually retrieved them, but the delay and the strange, mundane location became one more thread the family couldn't stop pulling on. Why were the keys there? Why did it take days? Nobody has offered a fully satisfying answer. Thread 3, the digital silence. Nolan posted on Snapchat almost every single day. Friends and family describe it as habitual. Vacation photos, check-ins, the small digital breadcrumbs of an ordinary life. On July 4th, that stopped. For 24 hours, nothing. And when Nolan's phone was eventually recovered, something didn't add up. Its physical location did not match the last track data associated with his Snapchat account. One data point, one inconsistency. But in an investigation already strained by contradicting eyewitness accounts, it's one more piece that doesn't fit the frame. Memories fade. Stories shift in the retelling. But GPS data doesn't have an opinion. Investigators were able to pull a detailed movement history for the boat Nolan and his friends took to Horn Island that day. This is where the case moves from, she said, into something closer to fact. 9:56 a.m. The boat departs the dock in Ocean Springs. 11:14 a.m. The boat arrives at Horn Island. For the next several hours, the group is on the island. This is the window where the contradiction lives. The window where Katie says one thing and the friends say another. 4:31 p.m., the boat leaves Horn Island. Without Nolan, that timestamp is the hinge of this entire case. At 4:31 p.m., a group of young adults got into a boat and left a remote barrier island, and the friend they arrived with was not on board. What happens next only deepens the unease. 5:52 p.m., the boat stops at Fort Bayou. 6:06 p.m., the boat reaches a dock. 7:19 p.m., the boat is moved again, this time to a boat launch. And then, the detail that raises the most questions. The boat was eventually towed over land, 70 miles away, to Biloxi. Investigators have not publicly explained why a boat involved in an active missing person case made multiple stops across several hours before being transported a significant distance from where its passenger was last seen. For a family desperate for clarity, this fragmented, hours-long sequence of movements has become almost as troubling as the disappearance itself. On July 15th, Nolan's parents sat down with District Attorney Angel Myers-McElrath. It's worth pausing here to explain plainly what some of these legal terms actually mean, because misunderstanding them has fueled a lot of online speculation. A grand jury is not a trial. It does not produce a verdict of guilt or innocence. Its sole function is to review evidence and determine whether there is enough to justify formal criminal charges. A grand jury being convened means investigators believe there's something worth examining closely. It does not mean anyone has been or will be charged. There's also been confusion about federal involvement. The FBI's role in this case is limited specifically to assisting with any threats that cross state lines, a jurisdictional technicality, not a takeover of the investigation. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office remains the lead agency. They are the ones building the timeline. They are the ones interviewing Katie and the friends and everyone in between. And as of now, they have not closed this case because it isn't finished. In cases like this, money changes the temperature of an investigation. A reward of $100,000 has been offered in the Nolan Wells case. It's important to be precise about what that reward is actually for. It is not a payment for tips, theories, or information about Nolan's whereabouts in a general sense. It is specifically offered for information that leads directly to an arrest and conviction. That distinction matters. A six-figure reward tied to a conviction signals that investigators believe a crime occurred, that this is not simply a tragic accident or a case of someone getting lost. It raises the stakes for everyone involved, and it raises the incentive for someone who knows more than they've said to finally come forward. But large rewards and viral attention come with a cost: misinformation. 2 pieces of evidence spread rapidly online in the weeks after Nolan disappeared. Both turned out to be false. The first was a photo allegedly showing Nolan at a pool party on the day he disappeared, seemingly proving he was alive well after the timeline investigators had established. Metadata told a different story. The photo was taken more than a week earlier on June 27th. It had nothing to do with July 4th at all. But by the time that correction circulated, thousands of people had already seen the original claim. And for a few days, it gave the family a false, cruel flicker of hope. The second piece of misinformation was a video, an argument, allegedly involving Nolan, that spread across social media as supposed evidence of a confrontation before he disappeared. Friend Tristan Shepard came forward to confirm that the voice in the video was his own, not Nolan's. The clip had been mislabeled, misunderstood, and shared far beyond the context it came from. Both moments illustrate something important about cases like this. When official information is scarce, the internet fills the silence. Sometimes with good intentions, sometimes not. But false hope is still false. And for a grieving family, every debunked rumor is another small grief of its own. 6 months later, here is what is actually verifiably unresolved. The grand jury process is ongoing. No charges have been filed. No one has been cleared. A joint inspection of phone data, representing multiple parties involved that day, is still pending, led by the family's attorney, Eric Hertz. That inspection may be the single most important remaining piece of this puzzle. Phones don't forget. They log locations, timestamps, app activity. If there are answers to be found in digital evidence, that inspection is where they're most likely to surface. And at the center of it all, the contradiction between Katie's account and the friend's account remains exactly that, unresolved. But underneath the grand jury filings, the GPS coordinates, the metadata, and the legal terminology, this is still simply a story about a mother and father in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, who took their son on vacation for 4th of July and came home without him. Christine Wansley is not asking the internet to solve this case. She's asking for the truth, whatever it is. So here's what I want to ask you. Of everything we've covered tonight, the conflicting stories about what happened on that beach, the strange, fragmented GPS timeline of the boat, or the small details of families still can't explain, the shorts, the keys, the silent phone, which unanswered question do you think matters most right now? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to be here when the next update on this case breaks, subscribe and turn on notifications.